Chapter 153 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Heaven on Earth. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. When Vishnumaya was born to Yashoda, everyone in Gokula went into a trance, and they only knew that a child had been born to Yashoda. They did not even know whether it was a boy or a girl. After Vasudeva came and the exchange of the children had taken place, they all woke up from the deep sleep and news spread like wildfire. A son had been born to Nanda. The entire Gokula rushed to the house of their chief to see the child. There he lay, the Lord of the universe, by the side of his mother. Small and frail, held in her arms, they said he looked like a blue lotus. Nanda was in the seventh heaven. He had a son who was beautiful as the moon. He made the Brahmins recite the holy mantras to avert all evil, and he gave away gifts to many people. The purification ceremony by name Jatakarma was performed for the newborn child. The earth is purified by Kala, time. The human body is purified by bathing in clean water, dirty vessels and such like by cleaning with cleansing agents. The child which has been born of the womb of a woman is cleansed by Jatakarma. Brahmins are cleansed by yagas. Wealth is purified by giving. The senses, the indriyas by tapas. The mind when it is made to realize contentment, and the Atman when it has learnt Atma Vidya, the truth about itself. The entire Gokula had a festival look, since a prince had been born there. Every house was decorated and the streets were all sprinkled with perfumed water. The women wore gay colored clothes, and the gopas and the gopis were dancing in the streets. The women waved silver plates filled with saffron water in front of the child and said, "May you live long, let no evil befall you." Rohini had given birth to a son too, and she was sister of Yashoda. She was hiding in Gokula to escape the tyranny of Kamsa, who had been harassing all the Yadavas and their women. So the two sisters with their sons were glowing like queens in the midst of the gopis. Rohini's son was fair and Yashoda's son was dark. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Chapter 154 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Putana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nandagopa was one of the vassals of Kamsa, and the time had come when he had to make his annual visit to Mathura to pay his tribute to the treasury, as was the custom. He went to Mathura. Hearing that Nanda had come to Mathura, Vasudeva went to see him. They had been very close friends, and they embraced each other with affection like the body welcomes the soul. Vasudeva then said, "I heard that you are the father of a son. I am indeed fortunate that I am able to see you and tell you about my happiness at the good fortune that has befallen you. You are very dear to me, and yet it is very rarely that we meet. In this world, those who love each other, those who would love to be together always, are very rarely granted their wish. We are like pieces of driftwood floating on the surface of the waters of a river which flows on and on. We meet for a while, and for a while we are together, and then time parts us and our paths become different. I am happy, however, to know that you are surrounded by your people in Gokula. I hope that my son is well, since you and I are like one soul with two bodies. He is as much my son as yours." Nanda spoke with tears in his eyes and said, "You have been very unfortunate. Your sons have been killed by Kamsa, and the last one was a girl child, and she too, I am told, left you and flew into the sky. Fortune, good or bad, rules the life of a man, and we are powerless in its presence. Misfortune has been your constant companion so far. Who knows, times may change. However, man who does not set any great store by the wayward ways of fortune is one who has understood the truth about the Atman. and such a man is unmoved by the vagaries of fate. Vasudeva replied suitably and said, My friend, do not tarry in Mathura too long. You have paid your dues to the king. I feel that there are evil omens to be seen in Gokula. It is better that you hurry back to your wife and child. They took tender leave of each other, and Nanda proceeded towards Gokula in a cart drawn by a high-born bullocks. His mind was uneasy since Vasudeva had spoken of evil omens. He knew that Vasudeva would not have spoken thus unless something was threatening them. Praying to Narayana, Nanda hurried his dear bullocks and travelled towards Gokula. Kamsa thought that the time had come when he should act according to the advice of his evil mentors. He decided to begin the killing of all the newborn children in the country. He thought up methods of doing it and finally decided on the right person to execute his orders. The wife of one of his mentors went by the name of Putana, and she was a dreadful Asura woman. Kamsa summoned her to his presence and told her what he wanted her to do. Without a qualm, she agreed to do as she was bid. From that moment, she began wandering at will in the nearby cities, villages, places where people had their homes. Is it not a fact that the Asuras can show their powers only in places where the praises of the Lord are not heard? When such is the case, how could Putana ever hope to do harm to the Lord himself, who was living in Gokula in human form? Wandering as she was at will, one day Putana, who was flying in the air, saw Gokula, and since she had not gone there yet, decided that she would go there. With her powers of Maya, she changed herself into a beautiful woman, and she went to the sacred spot by name Gokula. She looked around, and seeing a large house where a number of women were coming and going, she entered the house. It happened to be the palace of Nanda. Putana had tied up her hair in a loose knot and had placed a wreath of jasmines on it. With her wide hips and lovely breasts, she caught the eyes of everyone there. She was indeed charming. Her hair was curly and fell in tight little curls around her face, and the passing breeze played with it, lending charm to her face. She smiled often, and in her hand she held a lotus. The gopis thought that it was the goddess Lakshmi herself. So beautiful was Putana in her disguise. She won the hearts of the simple gopis who were all guileless. She entered the house of Nanda and reached the courtyard where the Lord was. He had concealed all his glory in the form of a small child, and he was like a live coal covered with ashes. It was by chance that Putana saw this beautiful child in the cradle. As soon as he set foot in the courtyard, the child closed his eyes. Perhaps the Lord knew that she would be blessed with his grace if his eyes fell on her, and that would indeed be a hindrance to his self-appointed task, destroying the wicked and protecting the good, for which purpose he had been born. Putana looked all around her. It so happened that no one was about. She lifted the child from the cradle. Taking him in her arms, she sat down and placed him on her lap. It was as foolish as taking a live cobra which is sleeping and placing it on your neck, thinking that it is just a piece of string. So she sat there. The maids and others who were passing by did not pay any attention to the stranger who was having the child on her lap. They were so overcome by her beauty and apparent charm that they did not attach any importance to her actions. Putana then loosened the knot which held her blouse tight, and with the child on her lap, she put his lips to her breast, which was filled with poisoned milk. The Lord held her breast firmly in his two little hands and began to suck lustily. After a few seconds, she realized that he was sucking her very life. She was in great pain, and all her vitals were tortured when he sucked at her breast. She began to scream. Her purpose was all forgotten. Leave me, she kept on saying, and she tried to pluck her breast away from the mouth of the child. But it was of no avail. She shrieked in agony, and the earth, the sky, even the planets shook in response. So loud was her pain filled voice. People thought that there was a thunderbolt which had fallen on the earth somewhere. With a last cry of agony, Putana lost her life. Her beautiful form was all gone. She fell down dead, and she looked like the great Vritra after he had fallen a victim to Indra's Vajra. When she fell, trees around her extent of to the extent of 6 kroshas fell like pieces of twigs. People rushed to the spot where the noise came from and found this mountain of a woman fallen on the ground. They stood amazed, and suddenly they saw Nanda's little son playing on her immense breast. They rushed towards him and carried him away from there. Yashoda and Rohini then performed so many of the rites which are meant to protect a child from evil, and they all stood around the form of the dead Putana. Yashoda hurried inside with the child, and having fed him at her breast, she put him to sleep and covered him with a piece of silk. Nanda arrived just then from Mathura, and he was taken aback at the scene which met his eyes. He told everyone, "Indeed, my friend Vasudeva has divine gifts, or else how could he know that there would be danger here? He told that evil omens would be seen in Gokula and asked me to hurry home." It took all the Gopas a very long time to move the body of Putana. They had to cut her up like they would logs of wood, and piling them all up, they set fire to it. There was a great conflagration, and the sky was lit up by the glow from the fire. When the body was burning, people around were amazed at something unusual. There arose from her burning body the perfume of sandalwood and divine scents. No one could explain it. Putana, who was an Asuri, was killed by the Lord. He had drunk off her breast, and all her sins had been sucked out of her. She had become purified since she had touched the Lord, and he had touched her with his lips. Fortunate Putana. When the grace of the Lord is given to a woman who wanted to feed him with poison, what then of those who worship him with milk and payasa as offerings? Fortunate indeed was Yashoda and the gopis and the cows in Gokula who fed him with milk. They reached moksha, from which no one comes back to the earth. The cowherds could not connect the divine scent which pervaded the place and the burning body of Putana, who had now become Punita. They just wondered as to where the perfume came from and went to their homes. Nanda was then told about how a beautiful woman came into Gokula and had deceived everyone there. No one had guessed that she was an Asuri, and it was the good fortune of all of them and the grace of Narayana that protected the child from the dread calamity which might have overtaken him. They talked about it far into the night and went to sleep, still unable to explain how the child had managed to escape from the dreadful women, and once again they offered up prayers to Narayana for protecting the child. Falashruti. Anyone who listens to the story by name Putana Moksham with attention and reverence will be blessed by the good fortune of having his mind eternally set on Krishna. He will have unswerving devotion to Krishna. King Parikshit said, "My lord, you have told me the stories or the many avatars of Narayana. Matsyavatara was wonderful, and so were there others. And the purpose for which the Lord assumed these avatars have amazed me and filled my ears and my mind with undiluted pleasure. But this avatar of the Lord, I feel, is the most beautiful of them all. I have been told that listening to the stories of Krishnavatara makes the despondency in the mind vanish, and the many desires which make a man unhappy also vanish. The mind becomes cleansed of all impure thoughts. The mind thinks only of the Lord, and it wants only the company of the devotees of Narayana. Please have the goodness to fill the last few days of my life with the infinite pleasure of listening to the praises of Krishna and about the incidents in Gokula which thrilled all the men who were fortunate to have been with him. Shuka continued the narration of Krishna's Leelas. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Chapter 155 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Shakatasura and Trinavarta. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The little son of Nanda and Yashoda was fast growing up. He was now 3 months old and he had just learned how to turn over on his belly. There was great joy in the heart of Yashoda when she saw her son lying on his stomach and smiling at her. The day happened to be the Janma Nakshatra of the child, and so she decided to have a great celebration. She had invited all the people in Gokula, and the large group of men and women went to the banks of the Yamuna. In the midst of music and dancing and the chanting of mantras by the Brahmins, the child was given a bath and gifts were given away to everyone who had come. Yashoda looked at her son, found that he looked tired out and sleepy because of the bath and excitement of the day. She therefore placed him in a cradle which was placed under the cart in which they had come to the river bank. She was sitting with all her friends and did not notice that the child had got up after a while. He cried and no one paid any attention to him. He became very angry, and with his little legs more tender than the creeper clinging to a tree, he kicked the cart whereunder he was placed. There was a great noise, and the people saw that the cart had fallen far away as though it had been flung away. All the vessels and pots which had been placed in it had been either broken or crushed, and the wheel had come off the cart. The cart had fallen on its side. No one knew what had happened. Some of the little boys who had been there said that the child had kicked the cart, and this was the result. The people did not know how it could be possible for such a small child to perform such a feat. They thought for a while, and the mother gathered the child in her arms, thanking God that nothing had happened to her darling. No one knew that Kamsa's henchman was an asura by name Shakata. He had come to Gokula and he had entered the wheel of the cart with the intention of running away with the child and later killing it. The Lord knew what he was up to, and with a kick of his sacred foot, he killed the asura, and no one knew what had happened. Once, Yashoda, after bathing her son, sat in the courtyard with the child on her lap. All on a sudden, she found that the child was very heavy. She did not know why, and thinking that it was just her imagination, she tried to forget it. But the weight became more and more, and finally, finding it unbearable, she placed the child on the ground. Seeing that he was sleeping, she went inside the house to mind several duties of the household. Another of Kamsa's myridmans, Trinavarta by name, had come to Gokula to kill the newborn child. Ever since Putana died, they must all have come to the conclusion that the danger to their king lay in Gokula, in the form of the dark-skinned child which was the darling of everyone. Trinavarta took the form of a whirlwind. Everyone in Gokula was suddenly overpowered by the fury of the sudden blast. There was so much power in the current and so much of dust that no one was able to see anything. They had to close their eyes and hold on to something firm, lest they should be swept off their feet. The 8 quarters were resounding with the noise of the whirlwind, and there was darkness everywhere. People were rushing here and there in panic. Suddenly, the fury of the wind abated. They could now open their eyes. Yashoda was rushed to the courtyard to take her child, could not find it. She called out to others, and they all looked everywhere for the child and could not find it. Stones and dust were falling from the sky incessantly, blinding them on, and still the search went on for the child which could not be found. The entire Gokula was plunged in awe, since their dear beloved child was nowhere to be seen. Trinavarta, in the meantime, had carried the child far away, high in the sky. His aim was to rise as high as he could and then to dash the child to the ground and thus kill it. The child, however, had become very heavy, so heavy that he found it impossible to lift the child. He tried to drop it, but he could not. The child caught his neck between its two little hands, and Trinavarta found himself choking. It seemed to him as though a huge rock had been tied to his neck and that it was throttling him. He could let his breath come only in great gasps, and even that stopped after a while. Trinavarta was dead. When the fury of the whirlwind had abated, the people of Gokula saw the huge form of the Asura fall down. In his arms, they found the child. They took the child, which was clinging to the immense chest of the dead Asura, and gave it to Ashoda. No one could understand how it had happened, how the child escaped death at the hands of one who evidently was an Asura. In their joy at getting him back, no one paid much attention to the fact that this young child had killed the Asura. They spoke to themselves and said, "Those who wish evil to others are destroyed. They die because of their own evil nature." Someone else said, "It is fortunate that Narayana looks kindly on us and ours, or else how could the child have lived?" A third man said, "Nanda has performed so many good actions. He has spent so much wealth on charity, and he is such a good man that God is good to him." One day, Yashoda was feeding her son. He drank his fill and he was playing with her for a while. Suddenly he felt sleepy, and Yashoda was looking at him with a tender smile. He was yawning and his little mouth was small and round like a flower. When she was thus looking at his mouth, which was open, Yashoda was taken aback at what she saw. Inside the little mouth, she saw the universe. She saw the sky, the three worlds, the clusters of stars, the sun, the moon, Agni, Vayu, and the lords of all the quarters. She saw the oceans and all the islands. She saw mountains, forests, animals, and everything that had been created. A trembling seized her, and she wondered what it was all about. Before she could even think on it, the Lord covered her with his Maya, and she forgot the entire incident. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Chapter 156 of Shrimadbhagavatam, the naming of the children. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudeva was very particular that the religious rites for his sons should be performed properly. He summoned his family priest Garga by name. He told him about the children who were growing up in Gokula and asked him to go there as though by chance and to name them and to perform the other rites necessary for Kshatriya children. Garga arrived in Gokula. Nanda received him with great joy and excitement and reverence. He prostrated before him. He honored him duly, and after offering him Arghya and Padya, he placed him on an honored seat and said, Brahman, how can I express my happiness? Brahman, how can I express my happiness at your coming? When great men like you leave your ashramas and come to the houses of ordinary men like me, it is clear that your desire is to do good to us. Or else, how can I, tied as I am to my household, who has no time to visit holy places, who is the lowest of all people because of my inability to spend time on noble actions like Tirtha Yatra and visiting holy spots, how can I say, be blessed with the sight of a great personage like your gracious self? You are proficient in the study of Jyotisha Mayanam, which is supposed to teach men which is supposed to teach men knowledge which is beyond the comprehension of the senses. Please let me take advantage of the good fortune that has befallen me. I have two sons, and if you will grace me with your blessings, please perform their naming ceremony and the accompanying rites. Garga said, Nanda, I am the family priest of the Yadavas, and I have earned some reputation in the world, and people follow my action intently. If I perform the rites you speak of, Kamsa will hear about it and try to guess to why a priest of the Yadava house should have performed them, and he may rashly arrive at the conclusion that your son is the son of Devaki. When her eighth child was born, it is well known that Kamsa found it to be a girl child. This child flew into the skies out of his hands, as you must have heard, and told him that the son who is meant to kill Kamsa has already been born and is growing up somewhere. And again, Kamsa will think about the great friendship which exists between you and Vasudeva. On top of all this, if Kamsa hears that it was I who performed the rites for the child, he is sure to cause a lot of trouble to you and to your child. Nanda said, we can avert all that you are afraid of. In this Gokula, in my house, without the knowledge of even my nearest kinsman, please perform the rites secretly. I will not have any open celebration or announcements. I am very keen that you should be the one to name the children. Garga agreed to do what he had actually come there to do, the mission for which he had travelled all the way to Gokula. He said, this young child, this son of Rohini, charms everyone with his beauty and will, in the later life, charm everyone with his excellent qualities. I will name him Rama. Since he will also be very powerful, he will be known as Bala. He is also to be named as Sankarshan. This other son of yours is dark in complexion, and I will call him Krishna. Once, in his previous birth, he was the son of Vasudeva, and so we can call him Vasudeva. But do not let that name be used. Let it be a secret. The wise say that your son has many names according to his many qualities. I know them, but the men of the world do not know them. This child, which is the source of joy to you and all these in Gokula, will bring you great good fortune. Because of him, all your troubles will disappear. In one of his previous births, the kingdom was without a king, and as a result of this, the country became harassed by thieves and atheists. This son of yours was born as the king of the country and delivered it of its trouble. This refers to the Avatara Prithu. Vena was a king who was bent on harassing his subjects. He would punish all those who protected the Vedas and the Vedangas, and atheism was gaining the upper hand. It followed that thieving and other similar adharmas became rampant in the country after the death of Vena. Lord Narayana was born as King Prithu and delivered the earth of her pain. Those who love this son of yours, this Krishna, will not be troubled by enemies. Just as Asuras who are devoted to Narayana are not troubled because of their Asuric birth, please take very good care of Krishna, your son, who will be performing great things for the good of all of you. After blessing all of them, Garga left them and went his way to tell Vasudeva and Devaki all about the happenings at Gokula and about the welfare of the children. Rama and Krishna were growing up like the moon during the days of waxing. They were now able to crawl on their fours, and the silver anklets which they were wearing would make sweet music wherever they went. Soon they were able to toddle, and it was the eternal delight of their mothers and the women of Gokula to watch them taking hesitant steps and fall down and cry as though they were hurt. They would wander into streets and covering themselves with mud, they would come home and stand with their eyes wide open as though they were afraid of their mothers and their scolding. The mothers would gather them in their arms, and with the dust and mud soiling their silken dresses, they would hug their children. The children would smile, and their teeth, which had just begun to appear, would charm all of them like the thin silver of the moon which is seen in the sky. The gopis would forget their daily tasks. So absorbed would they be with the antics of the two children in Nanda's house. They grew up enough to run around all over the place. They began to play in Gokula with the children in the other houses. For hours on end, they would be missing, and Yashoda with Rohini would begin to worry. So passed the days of their early childhood. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.